Hello.
Hey.
Hello. Hello.
Hey.
Is Max in the same room, Davis? Okay, he just joined.
Hello. Hey.
Rita said she's going to be a few minutes late, but I think we might get started. Maybe we can get started with the release stuff, so get it out of the way.
Sure.
Okay, 1 second. Let me open the notes. Okay. I think we're almost there. Just a few PRs needs to be merged, I think. Going to paste the link into the chat. Hey, Alex is using Clippy background. Yes. Clippy is taking over. Okay, coming back to 311. Yeah, I think we have a few ones. Let me bump this. Yeah, it's the Gator, the dash image. I think that has LGTM. I don't know if Rita wants to review it, but we can ask her when she joins. The graduate external data in bump OPA. I have a PR out for the gatekeeper changes for the V1 beta 1 API. So just a gotcha. I think, Max, you might have seen my note. So we had to upgrade, we have to update Helm upgrade test to 3.9 for that to pass. And then we must also have external data turned on.
Must have external data turned on.
Yeah, the reason is the client, the cert must have a client auth, because we passed that to the cert controller, so that the gatekeeper cert that we generate has a client auth.
The gatekeeper cert that we generate has a. So we're talking about external data,
right?
So you said we must have external data turned on, which says to me that flag must be set to enabled, but I thought that's one thing we were doing.
This is on 3.9. So this is for Helm upgrade test.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. and then I didn't quite get the cert part. Seemed like a non sequitur, but we need to generate a cert for the external data resources. I
Yeah.
think what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
as part of 3.9, so we added the MTLS support, and that Ernest had to modify the cert controller to generate a cert with the client auth key usage. I'll paste the link in there. This one. So this one basically tells that, hey, you can use Gatekeeper's cert as a client auth cert.
Right.
This is why we must have the external data turned on. So the Gatekeeper cert has this.
Okay, so there's no like extra large logic we're adding with regard to the cert generation.
No, we just had to move the minimum version from 3.5 to 3.9, and that base version should have external data enabled.
Okay, minimum version for what?
For the Helm upgrade test, yeah.
Okay, okay, cool.
Yeah, so that one is a little gotcha. It took me a while to figure it out because it's just very random. But yeah, so that was the gotcha for that one. And then I think since anything before 3.9, we don't technically support it. So I think that's fine, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and also the upgrades, like we're only really are supporting a spread of one major version,
right?
If I remember right.
Yeah, I think we just never broke compat before, so it has been fine so far.
Streak ended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions about the external data in the OPA one?
Actually, there is one question that raises. So, if we upgrade, right? The whole point of needing to start with 3.9, if I'm understanding you right, is that the generated cert from the old version needs to support the client auth.
For MTLS, yes.
So one problem I could see is that the behavior of the cert generator basically says, if the cert is valid, don't touch it. So even if a user is on, I forget what you said, 3.9 or something like that, is where this was added.
Yeah, I think I posted it in the PR. So the source must be regenerated.
Okay, it's like, and you're saying it must be manually regenerated, is like.
Yeah, I think they'll need to add some sort of a steps to do that. Like, hey, this is like a gotcha there. They either need to use their own cert using the disabled cert rotation thingy, or they need to manually regenerate the certs.
Yeah, there's a third option where we test for this feature being enabled as part of the validity test, but I think I'm fine with putting it on the user to blow away the cert, because otherwise, like, blowing away the cert for them, you get like a brief bit of downtime on the API server.
Right, that makes sense.
Okay. Did I LGTM it, or is it just like pending?
I think I think you did a gray LGTM, not a green LGTM.
Gotcha. Okay, so but it's ready now. I should take another look.
Please.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, and I like that the manual regeneration, because that's something like, hey, I want to do this sort of thing, and it only affects external data, and then not the other parts of it. So if you're not using external data, I don't know if you want to regen and break clusters and possibly downtime.
Yeah, makes sense.
Cool. And I think the last item is a Helm fix. Looks like I got 2 LGTMs. Cool. So that should be good. Right. Any questions about any of the items? Anything else we should add?
No, I think we're just waiting for Rita to sign on so you could ask about the image flag bit.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, speaking of,
Perfect timing.
Oh, what happened?
We just assigned you all the issues.
What?
congratulations, you are now the sole owner of both Gatekeeper and OPA, actually.
Yes.
Wait, what are we talking about? I know it's a joke, but still, what is it?
Is it?
What?
We're giving you ownership of everything. So, you know, have fun with the issue queue.
Nah. It's a team effort. Are we looking at 111 right now? Sorry, I joined late.
No worries. Yeah, so the only outstanding thing for looking at 111, unless you have an objection to anything and say like this is not in a state to roll out, the only open question was the image flag and whether it looked good for you to merge or if you wanted to take another pass at that.
Are you guys saying something? Sorry.
No, we've gone silent. I think Rita is thinking.
I'm sorry, are you waiting on me for something? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. So the question for you was, do you think the image flag PR is ready to merge, or did you want to take another look at it?
I didn't see anything other than the comment I raised, and I think you explained it. So, yeah, I don't, no blocker from me.
Cool. So Davis, I think you're good to merge. Someone shout if they disagree. Cool. Awesome.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I think Surtash had raised some concerns about releasing it as alpha or something. I don't remember now.
Oh, I think Davis updated the docs for that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I added a note to say that the flag's in alpha.
Got it. Okay. Yay. Great to see it land. Awesome. Thanks for working on it.
Cool. Well, looks like there's a couple of design docs then as the next items.
Is there anything else blocking 111? Sorry, 311?
I need to go over Surtash's PR again because I like soft LGTM'd it and he got the test working. So I don't expect to find anything, but I
Okay.
should look.
Awesome. All right, let's if there's nothing else, let's look at some design docs. And thank you all for the feedback. More comments that I have not had a chance to look at yet. Okay.
That'll be a lively one.
Should I share my screen or would that be easier?
Yeah.
Yeah,
please.
okay.
Sure.
Let me share. Let me know when you can see.
I can see that you do not update your Chrome browser.
Wow, rude. Okay, where are we? New comments. Should we just go through the comments and address each one?
Yeah, does anyone not know what we're looking at?
I think folks have added comments here, so. Where's, wow, this is so weird. Why does it show that one up first? So I'm wondering, how do we plan on using this? Oh, no, I just included just to describe where this UID came from. Sorry if that's not clear, because I was thinking we could use the UID from the request.
What would we use the UID for?
I mean, I think y'all mentioned session ID.
This is for the inbound, like,
This is
the
the
admission
key.
request. Sorry, I thought this was the external data request or response. I got you now.
No, this is the request key. Sorry. The key we want to use to identify that uniquely identifies the response for a given request.
Yeah, and so some of this data structure that we use, like there's good news and bad news. The bad news is that the data structure that we want to use is probably coupled to the behavior that we want to support. The good news is that the data structure that we use for the cache, if we design the rest of things right, should be transparent to the user so we can change it and it will only cause pain to us. And so an example of what I'm thinking here is if we want to have a per request cache, right? And then be able to, once the request is done, say, delete all the things I cached for this request, you probably want to keep the all the cache identities, or sorry, all the cache data for a given session under its own key in a map. So you could just call delete and clean it up rather than needing to scroll through and doing if statements.
Right. I think this was the third option, right? So to your point, if we create the key object as such, then we could just delete that directly.
Yeah, that structure I was a bit confused by because of well, there's a few reasons. Yeah, where value is in relation to key.
Huh?
And it looks like it's a list. So like it's not going to be like string indexed. So
Well,
it's going to be hard to access it.
well,
I put a
option two.
suggestion below
Okay.
that. Sorry, go ahead.
All right. Well, option 2 is string, right? But I think you had mentioned we want to use a struct or something.
Right. So I put a suggestion below your option, whatever your last option was, 3 or 4.
Oh, here.
Yeah.
If
But
we
to show.
this can be wrapped in a higher level map. Key by. I think it's the same thing that it is basically the same idea, except you call it cache key, I call it key.
Well, the difference is key. So there's a couple of differences. One, the top structure here is a list for yours, whereas mine it's a map, right? So for yours, if you're looking for a particular request, you're going to need to iterate through the list to get a match.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then there's the multiple keys with a single value. I wasn't sure how to interpret that.
Because I think today the Rego request key is an array.
Right. So, but the keys, the response, you're expecting one value per key, right? And we're not expecting. So the keys field in terms of the outbound request object is meant for batching, right? So you only send out one web request. But in terms of caching, we probably don't want to assume every call has the same batch
Yeah,
contents.
they won't. Yeah.
Right. So storing each key individually allows you to make sure, like when you receive a batch, you can check the cache. If
Okay.
get rid of all keys that already exist in the cache, because you can like serve those immediately. If there's anything left, then you make a web request just for those missing bits. Populate the cache with those. Serve everything back to the caller.
Okay, so basically the idea is on before we check the cache, we flatten out the keys to make to make the cache key basically, right? And then for each cache key, we look up it, does it exist? If not, then we make the request, and then we whatever response comes back, we flatten it again and only store the ones that we don't have already. Or do we still update the cache if it already exists?
If they already exist, I mean, I'm open to different interpretations for that behavior. I would not personally look it up if they already exist, right? I would rely on expiry for that, whatever we decide for expiry. And the only other caveat I would say is that for cache misses, we do want to batch those outbound requests, right? So that might just have been implicit in what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. So basically, so let's use a real example, right? So let's say the regular request key is my key one and new key, right? If we see new key doesn't exist in the cache already, we'll make the request for both keys like the way we do today.
Oh no, we would just make the request for the missing key.
Okay, got it. Okay.
And then if there were two
Well,
missing
or you mean the missing keys?
Right.
Okay.
So if there are
Okay.
two missing keys, we would make a single request for
Okay.
missing keys. If there's like 5 missing keys over 3 providers, we would make 3 requests in parallel, one per provider.
Sure, got it. Yeah, I think that will work. And then so this means you're suggesting like a map of a map.
Yeah, if we're doing the session ID, like I didn't want to presume that because I think there's other comments that like are looking at that. You had an idea of having a unique cache object per operation, which could also be a way of doing it. So as I said, there's some coupling here between our data structure and the sorts of behaviors we want to support.
Right. And again, just to use real examples to make sure we're in agreement. So let's say an audit, right? Would we use something like, so say like the audit run ID, right? Would be used for this. So per run would have its own would have its own map, right? And then when we do I guess like if we do TTL, then it would expire when the time expires, right? Or the other idea I had was like on a fresh run, it would clear the old one.
Yeah, like if we're doing just TTL, we could probably use, we don't need to separate it out by invocation, right? Because either data is old or it's not, right?
Mhm. Right.
It kind of doesn't matter who initiated the call in the first place.
Right. Okay, so what about if we use the same interface for webhook? Then do we want to use this UID or is there something else we could use?
So first I want to like stress this is just the internal data structure in my view, not the interface for the cache itself, right? Like that we
Sure.
should, yeah. But in terms of like UID, the thing, if we have a global object, right? That's the Uber cache for all caches. Then we need to make sure the only thing we really need to make sure of is the keys are globally unique. I would just generate a GUID because that's super easy. They're definitely guaranteed to be unique within the same machine, and uh, if you add the cache in more places, you don't need to worry about it, right? Another option would be to use like a unique key prefix or something.
Is there a reason we don't want to use the one from the request? Since it's a unique identifier that's generated by Kubernetes.
The only reason would be to avoid collision if we had a second service, right? Like if the request ID, we don't know how these things are generated or what they look like, right? And so if we have some arbitrary second service that we are using, and there happens to be a collision, uh, that would potentially yield unexpected results. So it just avoids needing to care about that.
Mm, okay, let me think about this a bit. Alex, you have your hand up?
Hey, so I have a question that might take us in a different direction. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm still, ramping up here, but as I understand it, we want to cache the response from the external data provider. So like the question of freshness to me is how fresh do we want our info to be? Because like I'm thinking that external data providers can be dynamic in their responses. Any of you please like jump in, tell me off if I'm wrong. So like is there a time window where like we've cached the response, but actually this is the old response, and now we have to wait until some eviction mechanism kicks in? Um, is that like a real concern for this?
It's a potential concern. External data providers themselves are actually just proxies to the actual whatever service they're interacting with. And so different data types and different databases have different expiry data. So there's an expectation that external data providers will have their own cache, right? And so we can avoid probably what is the most expensive network hop, right? Because that's leaving the cluster, right? And you could imagine an external data provider just living as a sidecar otherwise. So if all of them are sidecars, caching at this level is like moot. Um, other than serialization, deserialization. The other concern though would be, and where I could see it being valid is caching is not always moot, right? There's a reason we're working on it. Caching at the gatekeeper level. I mean, and down below we mentioned audit, right? And for large clusters, audit can take a significant chunk of time to run. I forget if it's like order minutes or order hours, but long enough that even if we do our default assumption, which is have or what I thought my default assumption going into this, which is like TTL for the cache is just you cache per review, essentially. For something like audit, that cache might be stale by the end of it, more stale than is acceptable.
I see. Okay, so that was my thought. Thanks for chiming in, Max.
Also, I think, I mean, this was brought up, this is one of the questions, also. And I think this is, I guess, like gatekeeper's way of ensuring that things don't necessarily like take too long to audit something, right? It's a way for us to be a little bit more fault tolerant, and make sure, if there's a bad provider somewhere, we don't end up like DDoSing things, right? So I think long-term, this could also be configurable, right? But I think, should be configurable, I think. But I think as a first step, like, I think a time-based expiry makes sense to me, because then we could just say, hey, in an ideal case, here's how long we think the cache should be fresh. And if you want to change that for whatever reason, to your point, if provider needs it to be more up to date, then they can always configure that.
I would say maybe time-based plus maybe if it's not like in the middle of audit, because then we might get different results, right?
But we might get different results for audit just generally, right? Like, say you have external data, right? Every external data is, sorry, not external data, referential templates, excuse me. If referential data is still getting updated as audit is ongoing, right? So you do get that time skew effect regardless. So I think the salient questions would be like, one, how much time skew is acceptable? And I don't know how you could answer that without like the specifics of, well, what kind of policy are you running? How much is your external data changing? How often are you auditing? What's the impact of a false positive or a false negative because of a stale cache? And shoot, I lost my train of thought, but that I think would guide whether we how much the tearing actually matters.
I guess technically this is even possible today, right? Like, let's say you're scaling and you had many pods and you had some like pod level rego going on. It's possible, like, while it's running, maybe certain policies will flag it, but then change later. It's possible. Because like while in the middle of the run, resource get updated or something. I don't know.
Oh, one thing that's interesting too is, like, I don't know how many people are currently using external data, but this I'm going to use tearing, aliasing, and skew like interchangeably. I apologize. But basically, this inconsistent response is the current behavior, right? So, do we know? Does it have usage? Should people complained about that?
We don't have
Uh,
data on that yet.
Yeah, but I think that can happen, right? Like, say, in the middle of audit, we can get like pod A might have different results than, I don't know, another container inside pod A, or I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right. Sorry, I didn't have anything to say. Maybe you didn't as well.
No, I was just confirming. So this is not a concern then?
I don't think we know if it's a concern unless we have hard data from the alpha, right?
Okay, well, also just to, again, this other question about, what happens when provider request fails, right? Because it will happen.
What? No.
And so
This
when
is
that
perfect.
happens, obviously we do want the cache to be updated when that happens, but obviously that's going to impact the violations, right? So by definition, it's definitely going to have different results in the same run, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think we are thinking about future in some of the cases. We don't have data today, but say in a large cluster with a lot of pods, I can see that like happening. Either service interruption or I don't know, something happens with the provider or something.
Yeah, I think a big theme here is we want to be really flexible with how we design whatever the system is, so that as we learn what people actually need, we can tweak things to accommodate that.
Okay. So I think I will just put this here. And so if in the future we come back, we'll say that's why. So hopefully with more data in the future, we'll have better understanding of this. Anything else, Alex? Other than that?
No, I think this is a great chat about freshness. I'm not sure, it sounds, Max, like we are kind of hoping to add this under the hood. And then there's like this thread about like making this toggleable or toggleable, configurable. That's the word I can pronounce. Do you guys want to talk about that?
You mean this?
Sorry, go ahead, Rita.
Sorry, do you mean the TTL should be configurable, or what specifically should be configurable?
Right there on the there's like share touch saying +1 toggleable.
Oh, okay.
It's the same thing basically. Yeah. Like can the cache be turned off?
But like there's some like implications in the doc that this is like, there's a veil over my eyes as an operator. Like I don't know about this cache, right, Max? Am I getting that right?
As a template writer, you
As a
shouldn't know about the cache. As someone who like maintains a gatekeeper install, I could see knowing about the cache being a good thing, or having the option to know about the cache, I should say, being a good thing.
Like we have a bunch of flags for operators for webhook and audit today, right? And those are more for operators, not for the policy authors.
Yeah, if the policy authors need to worry about the cache, I submit we've failed. Because then if we need to tweak the behavior, and that behavior means we need to tweak all the constraint templates, that's going to be a very expensive tweak. The problem with like trying to put too much focus on the specifics of configurability is we don't yet know what we're looking at, right? Is it a TTL? Do we want to configure TTL? Do we want to have a different TTL per provider, right? Because different providers, different data profiles, as we were talking about. Or maybe it's just more expensive to look up certain providers. Do we want to do the per request stuff? I mean, it's sounding like no, at least at the start for this discussion, but we also put a pin in it saying we should get some hard data there, right? So
same goes with mutation, right? Like it's same, not just validation. Yeah.
Yeah. And mutation. Oh, yeah, mutation. We definitely want. Do we definitely? Actually, mutation. We should be good because mutation only ever reaches out once per request. At least for request granularity, there is the possibility the API server could call us twice, right? And that would
Mhm.
it would be nice for that actually if we had a TTL cache because it would increase the likelihood that the second call doesn't incur a network cost for reaching out to external data
Yeah.
and all the latency sensitivity for mutation. But yeah, that's a good unknown as well, right? Like, does it? What's the likelihood that the cache will still be valid uh, for the second mutation call, right? And if it's like a per item expiry, uh, even one expired item means that you're reaching out. So there's a lot to learn, I think, about these call patterns.
Okay. If there's no more.
Just one question on Alex's comment. Do we want opt-in or opt-out?
Alpha feature.
So opt-in.
Alpha feature, we always opt in, right?
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then I guess do we want to configure the TTL too?
I
Sounds
think
like
we should.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, I just realized, the TTL doesn't control the size of the cache, right? So I think Jay brought this up actually. What happens if it's too big? Let's say your TTL is too long. Yeah.
And like, how do you evict? Do you evict?
Yeah.
We definitely want a size limit, even just a stupid one where we like stop caching new data rather than try to be a little smarter about it using like least recently used for eviction or whatever. I think another pattern that's coming out to me from this discussion is these caching options and configurability might be specific to the enforcement point, right? Like Gatekeeper the webhook might have different caching concerns and constraints than Gator test, for example. And if anything else is using constraint framework as a library, we don't know where in infrastructure it lies and what it cares about. To me, what that says is we want to design things such that users can write their own caching layer if they really want to. By users, I mean consumers of the constraint framework.
Yeah. Which kind of piggies back on the other design doc that's in the agenda.
It's the other one I've forgotten. Oh, per process. Yep.
Yeah, it's definitely related. I think it's really hard to make that conclusion because this is sort of experimenting still, right? And I would prefer if we could maybe scope it to audit for now, meaning make it configurable to Gatekeeper for now, and then as we learn, maybe we could add it to the constraint level,
Constraint level.
the other design.
Oh,
Otherwise,
like
yeah.
Gator. Yeah. So more what I was thinking with that was it's more about the structure of how we implement it. Like we can start with audit first, but what I see is a model where the constraint framework takes some sort of minimal cache interface that is just sufficient for doing like lookups, right? We may want to put some thought into whether we want to have the ability to do session IDs, because that's going to be like pretty challenging to figure out, right? Like, how do you know what session ID is associated with the review commands? Blah, blah, blah. If we defer that discussion, there's some like risk of needing to break the interface in the future. Not so bad because it's alpha, and we should probably wrap this in its own like positional arg or functional arg. But then most of the actual logic of the cache lives in Gatekeeper, and all the handles for like the expiry and that we might want to implement, they live on like the concrete implementation and are
Right.
called by the caller. I think this points in favor of that design.
Yes. Because otherwise the two alpha things, or this is alpha, the other one's alpha, they're gonna like kind of depend on, this one kind of depends on the other one, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
All right, if there's nothing else about this, can we come back to this? I think I think I like this. Anyone has concerns about this proposal? I think this is pretty clean. Okay, if no objections, let's move on. Was there anything else I need to make sure we cover? We talked about this. Talked about this. Wait.
I have a high level question.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to provide the cache when we're calling .review, or do we want to provide the cache when we're constructing the client?
I was thinking when at the start, right? Like when you construct a client. What are the benefits of doing it per review?
So this whole like talk about session key stuff becomes moot for the as far as the framework is concerned if we provide it for every review call, because then the caller gets to decide which cache is supplied when. And that gives callers like a little bit more flexibility to manage just how caching behaves.
That is true. But then you can still configure the cache in Gatekeeper.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like
Okay.
Gatekeeper now is in like complete control. Like we could write a caching system that makes sense for audit and a completely different one that makes sense for webhooks if we wanted to, or not. Maybe it's the same cache.
Because I think
maybe-
dot review is in both places, right? Both in audit and in webhook.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so that makes sense. Yeah.
But then let's say for webhook, sorry, but then how do you say for a given audit run, how do you make sure they're using the same cache?
The audit manager, audit controller, whichever struct it is, would have a global cache variable. Not global, but you know.
Okay, so you will still be doing this. I mean, like you will still be creating the cache in main, and then you pass it into audit. Like that doesn't change.
You could, well, for the first brush, if you're just doing audit only and you don't care about webhooks, you could start out doing it in audit. But yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, but the
Who
idea
knows?
is that you will still create the cache instance in main, right? Whether it's that way, webhook will have its own, audit would have its own, right?
Well, main meaning the main entry
Gatekeeper
point
main.
for.
Yeah,
Uh,
gatekeeper main.
I would so if the model, it's going to depend on the calling model, right? This is the power and the pain. If you wanted to have for the webhook each request having its own cache, you would call this new cache argument for every webhook invocation. Whereas audit, you would call new cache every audit run if you wanted to isolate it per run. If you wanted a global cache object, you would do it in main. If you wanted to have a separate cache for audit and a separate cache for webhook, you would call it once in the audit constructor and once in the webhook constructor.
Okay.
It's flexible, but
All the permutations, yes. So to your point, for audit, we could, like, just to be easy, I could literally just put in the manager, like audit manager go.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Then by definition, it per run, like literally you're creating a new instance every time. Is that
you
what
don't need to. You could just create it one time in the whatever. I'm a little fuzzy on the names of the structs for audit right now, but there's this like main struct that spins up child audit runs, right? So if that main struct holds an instance, and every time you spin up a child audit run, you provide it that a reference to that instance, then you could have the same cache for multiple audit runs, and that would fit the TTL audit model, or sorry, TTL expiry model, like pure TTL.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how this will work for webhook. I think there's definitely trade-offs. That's why
Yeah.
we're scoping it out. It's out of scope.
Well, it's out of scope in terms of like the MVP, but
Right.
it's what's cool is we're taking that high level uncertainty and using that to inform sort of the broad strokes design, right, of where the cache gets injected and where it gets created, or all the maintaining flexibility as to where it gets created, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. So I think maybe I'll just add it to the audit controller just for now. I don't know. Or it doesn't really matter, because if it's in main, it would just be the same one that's used in the audit control. Anyway, so yeah, let's, I guess, come back to webhook later. Is there anything else y'all want to make sure we address? Are there anything? Oh,
I think that question is moot now since we.
oh, okay. All right, cool.
The last option.
Okay, thanks. Know that going allows us to use chug. Oh, okay, yeah. We talked about that already. Okay, we talked about session key. So if we were to do it in dot review, do we still need the session key?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, so we could, let me just document this, I guess. Where do we have the session key stuff? We may not need the session key if we are calling the cache from, I guess, the OPA.review thing, right? Yeah. But for auto run, okay, I guess you just use TTL. You don't really care. Okay, cool. Sorry. Anything else? But by the way, please stop me if you want to say something. I'm not looking at the chat.
It would also support per audit run too, but yeah, we would, if you want to use TTL just to start, that's also fine.
I don't wait, but if it's per audit run, if we're putting in OPA.review, it wouldn't, like, how would it know which run it came from?
Well, each run would receive its own cache object, right? You would construct a cache per run.
Okay, but so is this still true here then? Like, are we always constructing a new? Are we always calling this per run?
No, it's, again, like, it just depends on what we decide is necessary, right? Like, if we're fine with TTL, then we just create one,
Yeah,
maybe
right,
like in main even.
right.
Right.
That's why I'm asking, because depending on if we pick per run versus TTL, the way you create this would be in a different place.
Right. But and sadly we don't know what we want there. But the good part is it's cheap to change our minds. We
Sure,
just
sure.
need to change the bootstrapping code.
So at the moment, do we, since this meeting is to drive some decision, I guess, do we have a preference for TTL versus per run?
I would start with TTL, I think, just
Okay.
for like the space considerations, if nothing else. Like memory usage.
Oh, how about others? What do y'all think?
That sounds good to me. What do we want the time to be? I think that depends on the type, though. That's going to get confusing, depending on like how long the audit runs.
Yeah, and because it's alpha, I think here we're gonna have to throw the users through some hoops. We could try doing a per provider TTL, but I think starting out with a global TTL is easy. Well, TTLs aren't easy, to be clear, but easier than trying to do a per provider one. The downside of that is if we decide to go per provider in the future, we're going to break the previous usage of that flag or deprecate it or something, or it turns into a default.
I should
Yeah,
probably know this, but do we make any promises on how long audit will take?
no.
No.
Okay, never mind then.
So it could be forever. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it could be hours. Yeah, it's hard to know. That's why it's kind of tricky, because if you do TTL and then the TTL is like 5 minutes, but then audit is like runs for an hour, like, does it helping?
Yeah, because the audit calls are bursty. We scrape per kind, right? So we gather like a batch of pods, a batch of pods, a batch of pods, right? And let's imagine we're doing the image tag to hash provider. We're at least for that like batch of pods, because they're called one after the other, and really the throttling factor here is API server throttling us, calling it. We're going to Oh, no. Sorry, I'm forgetting Rita's change a while back. We actually unwrap the whole pods list and store it to disk. That's right. So we retrieve it in chunks. But by the time we're calling review, we have the entire set of pods. So yeah, for something like image tags 2 hashes, at least for all pods, that cache TTL is probably going to be good, right? We're going to be pretty fast, assuming there's no like network latency or other like really poorly performing constraint template or something like that.
That one is mutation max, that image tag to digest.
It was mutation, but yeah, I don't know. Didn't we also use it for validation, or we used signing, verified signing?
Yeah, the signing is an example for that one.
Yeah. Okay. Same idea though, right? We're processing batches of images. Batches of images are associated with like pod objects and deployment objects and stateful sets. But because we're chunking it by kind, any constraint that template that has a spiky relationship with reaching out to a particular provider, it should at least improve things. It doesn't mean you'll get a cache hit for 100% of the audit run after the first miss, but you should cut things down by like 1/5, let's say, for workload type resources, because there's like 5-ish different kinds of workload resources.
Cool. Also, we're over time. Thank you so much for all the feedback. Do we feel like this is ready for implementation, or should we do another round of reviews later?
So the thing that's going to be interesting is the interface that gets developed. Well, the cache stuff will be pretty obvious actually. The like read cache, right?
Yeah, I think this was like how this, like all the options for what the cache will look like, it was like point of contention for a bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, we will have to test. Ooh, sorry about that. We'll have to test this, but I think if we can flatten everything, I think that's fine by me.
Yeah, and cache key I think was the only like non-trivial thing, right? It's going to be like read cache key,
Huh?
missing, or here's the value.
Sorry, say that one more time.
The interface for the cache, as far as constraint framework is concerned, is just going to be query cache with cache key as an argument, and it's going to return like missing and or the cached value.
Yes.
Or no and, just or the cached value.
Right. You know what? Let me update I guess option 4 and come back, and then I'll tag everybody for another round of review. We don't have to wait till next community call. And then if y'all give me a thumbs up, then I think it sounds, I don't see anything else that should be blocking implementation, right?
Framework is definitely safe, I think. Gatekeeper probably safe, but I expect we'll have to like iterate on the PR some too.
Right, but actually, isn't this in framework?
The only thing that should be in framework is the definition of cache key.
Okay. Gotcha.
And an interface for like the cache object, right? Like cache objects provide a read cache function. And then the code that attempts to read the cache, that also belongs in framework.
Yes. Okay,
Because
let me
it calls read cache.
let me come back to this, and I'll ping folks for another round. All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the time. Bye.
Right.